Good afternoon. To the viewers at home, welcome to the ABA Antitrust Member Spotlight. We're fortunate to have Jimmy Moore with us today. Jimmy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Jimmy is an ABA Antitrust Section member and an associate at Axinn, Veltrop Harkrider in the DC office. And I guess I should say I'm Alexandra Clark. I'm a law clerk, DC admission pending at Latham & Watkins in their DC office as well. So you've done a lot. I think our viewers sitting at home will get a lot from hearing from your experiences. So we will just dive right in if that sounds good.
Great.
Okay. So I want to start with your background. You interned, you had great experiences, hands-on experiences, starting in law school with respect to antitrust, interning for both the FTC and the DOJ, impressively interning for the DOJ during the summer after graduating from law school and studying for the bar. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. I was working full-time at DOJ during the summer, and then at nights and on the weekends, I was going back to the videos, as you all may remember, Barbary videos from bar exam study.
Yeah, but that's a recent memory of mine that I'm trying to repress, but so it's really impressive. So where did your interest in antitrust begin?
Yeah, so I mean, I tell people this all the time. I used to think that it was kind of just this throwaway phrase that you fall into things in your career and that's how your career advances, but it's definitely been my experience. That is how it works out. So I took a class in antitrust, just the standard introductory course to antitrust from Scott Hemphill during law school. So I took that my fall of my 2L year. And that was right before I was signing up for a semester in DC to essentially spend the whole semester working at one of the federal agencies. And so having had that antitrust experience, just a few weeks before I had finished up exams and everything, when I was selecting the agencies, I expressed interest in working at either the FTC or the antitrust division at DOJ. And that's really kind of how it all started. And then I, from there, spent a whole semester of law school really just working full-time job with the people in Mergers 4 at the Bureau of Competition at the FTC. Great people and great experience too. I got to work on a lot of cases and really get practical experience that you don't necessarily get in law school.
That's fantastic. That's really great experience, especially at such an early point in your career. And so did that seal the deal for antitrust? Did you know from there when you were looking at post-law school opportunities that you wanted to practice antitrust law?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly started the dominoes falling. So I was getting ready to study for the bar exam during the summer right after law school, and I wanted to be in DC for personal reasons, but needed to find a way to make that work. So I ended up interning at DOJ as well, and then by the time that both of those internships were done, I accidentally had developed a specialty. And so from there, I spent a year clerking right after law school and was trying to decide where I was going to go next, and already have Skadden lined up, which is where I started my antitrust career, and interviewed there, loved the people, knew that I was interested in the substance, and that's kind of how I landed where I am today.
Awesome. And then here you are now 6 years later and a full-on antitrust attorney. And so that's great. I think that really is, sometimes you can't plan for the specialties that you're interested in, or you can't plan for it and things work out.
Right.
So switching gears to your current practice, I've seen that you've done a lot. You've handled the merger control deal side work and then also litigation. Are you currently, do you balance both, or have you shifted towards one?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I most love about antitrust is that you're not really in one box. I mean, you can certainly choose one portion of the practice, but you really have the opportunities to do transactional work, to do litigation work, to even do criminal white-collar investigations work. I tend right now to focus on civil litigation and criminal investigations, but I still do deal stuff. I feel like, doing everything gives you a little more perspective, and there's so much overlap, whether it comes to defining markets or just the economics more generally. All of that is really important to know and keep abreast of. I mean, you look at what the agencies are doing right now. In the merger context, for instance, they're really leaning on Section 2 monopolization theories just as much as they are in Section 7 for some mergers. So, having that experience, whether it's imported from lit to mergers or mergers to lit or into investigations, is all really important.
I think you already answered my next question, which is what keeps you interested in antitrust and what keeps you excited. But there's so many, just with the breadth of your practice alone, I think is an answer. But is that what you would say? Is that what keeps you in antitrust?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that the practical skills that you need are so varied that keeps it interesting. But even beyond that, I think is just learning about all these industries, things that you don't really think about prior to going into antitrust. No business people really love talking to lawyers, but I at least like to think that talking to an antitrust lawyer, they're talking about their day-to-day business. So maybe it's a little bit more exciting for them than it might have otherwise been. And just learning all of those details, I think, is very fascinating. I mean, you can look at a document all day long, but sometimes once you sit down with the person who wrote it, there's a whole nother meaning that you never would have understood unless you spoke with someone in the industry who really knew what that meant.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting point that not only is the law and the policy developing rapidly, but even just it feels like you're never working on the same deal twice or different, even within the same industry, you're always learning with each matter you take on, it seems like.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One thing that I've told people that I found most interesting and really kind of just speaks to how antitrust really applies to business is when I was working at the FTC and learning, I had obviously learned about geographic market definition in the antitrust course, but really applying it on the facts. I was working on a supermarket merger case, and we talked about, well, you can kind of define the geographic market by the ice cream rule. How quickly is your ice cream going to melt? Are you going to be able to get home with the ice cream not melted? That's basically your geographic market. Maybe not precisely so, but it really just kind of speaks to how antitrust and the industries really interact with each other, and it speaks to the practicalities of antitrust in a way that I didn't experience as much with other areas of the law.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like that. I think that's something that some economists could run with.
A little more descriptive than drawing circles.
Right. Well, and that actually kind of leads to my next question as well, which is circling back to that government experience. Do you draw upon that experience in private practice as you're counseling clients from just being a part of those conversations at the FTC and DOJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one area where antitrust is maybe not unique, but it's really important to have that government perspective. And really, I guess I should step back and say it's important in any area of the law to see both sides of the coin. I saw this when I was clerking. If you don't think about it from your rivals, your opposing counsel's perspective, you're probably going to miss something that's really important. And if you don't stop for a moment and think, okay, we've talked about all the great efficiencies of this merger, for example, but what are the agencies going to be thinking about really hard when they look at this transaction? If you don't think about those things, your arguments are not going to be speaking to the audience correctly. So I think that is valuable. I think that perspective is important. My judge always said, if you don't know exactly which way the case should go, you should write down both ways, write it going one way and write it going the other way. The one that writes easiest is probably the correct one. So I think being honest with yourself about that too is really important, and it's something that you can get from government agency experience.
Absolutely, and thank you. On behalf of the audience. I know that's really helpful as people are considering, even with the law students in our audience, considering government experiences versus working for a law firm, and by no means is there exclusive. You can do both, and it's a helpful insight, so thank you. And so on that note too, thinking about what students can do, law students who are interested are reading the antitrust headlines and want to dive in. Were you involved in the antitrust section in law school?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I hadn't really realized all the opportunities that were out there with the antitrust section when I was in law school. I luckily had great mentors when I first started practicing, who really encouraged me to get involved with the ABA antitrust section. And I think it's been really important. I mean, it's obviously important. Substantively, you can learn a lot of things. Law students, it's really easy to dial into an hour-long seminar at lunch, especially now in pandemic days. We're always on video now, so it's really easy to get engaged, even more so than it was when we were just dialing into a teleconference line. So I think that's important. If you're in DC and can swing it, I think going to the spring meeting is just an incredible experience. It's something that I don't think most sections of the ABA have, because there's really a community in the antitrust bar. And I think that is, again, important, not only from the substantive perspective, but getting to know people. When you're doing a merger review, for example, and you're sitting across the table from people you know at the agencies, there's a level of trust that you can have when they know that you're someone who's going to speak honestly. And it also enables you to understand their perspective and how you can best, again, as I was saying earlier, craft your arguments. So whether it's knowing people or learning things about antitrust law, I think the ABA section has all of those opportunities. In addition to speaking and writing opportunities, which I highly encourage people to do as well.
Great, that's really helpful. And I think that really covers the rest of my questions. I mean, if anyone was on the fence about antitrust before watching this interview, I mean, I think they're sold now, thanks to you. So thank you so much. And thank you all for joining our ABA Antitrust Member Spotlight. And thanks to Jimmy Moore for the interview. Thanks for taking the time. It was really a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me.